Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on an introduction into user story mapping. Today, we're going to go over what it is, why it's useful, and how you can incorporate it into your product development process. So, building software is no easy task. It requires a lot of different people from different backgrounds, like in product management, design, software engineering, and even business, to come together and build a product and design a product that people will want to use. It's often found that new ideas are often underestimated because people haven't gone through the process of trying to better understand what it is that they want to build, why, what kind of outcomes they're looking for, and what kind of goals they have. So building software is no simple task. And today we're going to show you a way to incorporate user story mapping into building better products. So why is software development complicated? Well, there's often miscommunication. It's difficult to communicate from one party to another what needs to be done. Sometimes written software requirement documents are created as a way to try to communicate what needs to be done. We all know that that doesn't sometimes work very well. The requirements are usually incorrect or incomplete or out of date. I don't know how many times I've read something and someone tell me, oh, yeah, that was a good idea, but we're not doing that anymore. But it's still there in the requirements document. It's also very difficult to visualize the work in a requirements document. You can't see the big picture, and there's just no way to map what's in someone else's head to the development team. So user story mapping will help bridge that gap between what needs to be done and for people to be able to understand or visualize the work. And last, there's no shared understanding. There's this famous picture from Jeff Patton, the author of User Story Mapping. You have a group of people who think they all agree, but then they get to a whiteboard, sketch their ideas out, and they find that they don't agree. And then they come together, collaborate, and then finally they have a shared understanding of what it is that they want to do. So why do we want to use user story mapping? Why do we want to incorporate it into our development process? Well, it has several benefits. One, I'm sure a lot of you guys out there have backlogs. Backlogs don't tell stories. They're just a prioritized list of what needs to be done next. Second, people really relate well to telling stories. It's a good way to communicate to another person story, and people relate well with stories and they remember them quite vividly. We want to enforce conversations over elaborate and detailed documentation. It's okay when we get into story mapping, when I show you a little bit later, we don't have every detail fleshed out. That's okay. That's where the conversation will take place and fill in those details. It's a much better way. People relate to things when they see visuals. So the visual story map will just allow people to better understand what it is that they need to do. It helps you create the scope of your product or project. It allows you to break the work down into more manageable chunks. And last, it helps you understand what it is that you need to build. Who should be involved? That's a good question. I see we have tens of thousands of users on Cardboard, and I see people who do the user story map by themselves, and I see people who do it in sessions with a group of people. I think the right sweet spot of people is 3 to 5. I think if you get more than 5, it just becomes, it bears the team down a little bit. It doesn't flow as well if you have too many people involved and too many voices involved. But you can see here we have several different people that could be involved in the process for different reasons. Executives may understand the business outcome that's trying to be accomplished. Product managers, they are typically responsible for the product and the voice of the customer. UX and UI designers, they too have a stake in the product and making sure that the UI and the user experience is what customers will appreciate. Product owners too. Product owners are often the ones who bridge the gap between the UX designers, the business outcomes that are needed, and the development teams themselves. So you can have any group of these people, any kind of combination of these people to help build your user story map together. And like I said, some people do them individually and then we'll take them to the team. I'm not sure I recommend that approach as much as I do as a group getting together and sitting down and fleshing out the story map as a team. What does it look like? Here's a team right here who's building a story map using Post-it notes. This is a perfectly fine way to do it. If you have people who are all co-located in the same location, you can get together and build a story map using just Post-it notes and a big white wall. So the part of the process that we're talking about the most here today will be the discovery process, which is up here in the upper right-hand corner. Agile talks a lot about the build process, sprints, backlogs, daily stand-ups, retros. They talk a lot about that, but they don't talk. Agile doesn't really talk a lot about how do you make sure you're building the right product? How do you understand the customer a little bit better? And this is just a simple process that you start from insight, gaining insight from the market and how people, what kind of hole you're going to fill or what kind of new feature you're going to provide. You better understand that and define it. And then you go into the discovery process, which user story mapping fits in well with, to elaborate upon that. And then you build it. And then you should have measurable goals to make sure to see if you're hitting those goals or not, and adjust accordingly if you're not. Okay, so let's get to it and let's work through an example together. So we're going to build a food delivery app, a simple application that would run on your phone that allows people to order food and have it delivered to them. So what I did first is actually built a persona of what I call Hannah, the hungry professional. And I walked through the process of what she's thinking and feeling, what she sees, what she says and does, what she hears, what kind of pain she has, and what kind of gains that can be achieved through this application that we're going to build a story map together here as a group. So yeah, you don't have to do this step, but I do recommend understanding your customers or your users. It's very, very valuable in the process to building better products. All right, so the first thing with our food delivery app, these are just some simple mock-ups of what the application might look like. There's ways to browse different types of food. There are ways to order, a way to add more items, see what other people have ordered, and then finally submit your order. So we're going to walk through building a story map as a group here today to better understand how to do this. So I first created a legend here of we're going to do a 3-tier story map of user activities, steps, and then finally the detailed steps. So we just simply start thinking about going through the process of what this might be. So we'll start with the activities that the user might do. And the first thing they're going to do is probably find and install our application. So we keep thinking through, okay, so after they have it installed, what would they do next? Well, it's most likely that they're probably going to research food or different restaurants. Okay, so after they've done their research, what would they do next? It's likely that they would probably order and pay for their meal. So order, pay for my food. We may want to add a process where they sign in or sign up. So the next time they come back, we already have their credit card on file. We can track important information if they do sign up. So sign up or sign in. Then after they go through the entire process, we think feedback is important. So maybe we will solicit the users to add some feedback about their experience. So leave feedback. So what we have here is all the activities associated with the application at a high level. And now we're going to go through and break the work down even further to better understand what it is that we're building. What does each one of these high-level activities mean? All right, so we'll go through some user steps that the user might go through. So to find and install our application on the phone, they might search an app store. And then after they install it, we might want to go through a tutorial with them or do some initial onboarding. I think this is something that's often underlooked or people don't think about enough, is how to onboard a new user and how to teach them about the app that they just installed. So we're going to build a quick tutorial, an intro to walk the user through the application. Okay, so after they've gone through the tutorial, what would they do next? They would start searching for whatever it is that they're looking for. So search for food. And then once they find it, they might view the restaurant, look at reviews, things like that. So view the restaurant I want to order from. They also might want to look at a menu. So we'll go ahead and have a menu thing here too. View the menu. We'll move the greens over a little bit, create some more room. And then they may want to not finally, but place their order. And then under sign up and sign in, two basic cases here. One is first sign up for new users and sign in for existing users. And for leave feedback, if we think about that, we might want to ask for a star rating. Ask for a star rating between 1 and 5. So we now have our backbone of our application that we're going to build. And it's still really high level, and now we need to get into the nitty-gritty details. And this is where the fun part begins, because as a group, you can start having some really great conversations about what it is that you want to build. So when we say search for an app, or no, search for food, let's start there. What are all the different ways that we want to offer search? Well, we could offer search through types of food. So let's see, search by types of food. Mexican, burgers, etc. We could search by a restaurant name. So if we know we wanted Qdoba, we could just search for the restaurant name. We could look for restaurants that are close to us, so it takes a little bit less time for delivery. And let's see, any other ways that we want to offer search? See, looking down here, types of foods, distance. Let's say that we wanted to search for restaurants that have 4 stars and up. So we could offer that too. So search for restaurants by a star rating. So now we've fleshed out the search capability, and we have details about how we want to do search in our application. Start up here, something simple as search for food, but here we've broken down all the detailed steps that allow the user to search by various different means. And this is really important to the team because this is a lot more work than just simply search for food. We now have detailed user story steps about what search really means. And if we want to, we can augment each one of these stories and add even more information than what we see here on front of the card by clicking this little guy right here. We could give estimates for stories if we wanted to. So if we were using t-shirt sizes, maybe this is a small, could assign it to somebody, even add acceptance criteria. Should be able to search for restaurants with X or more stars. So we can put our acceptance criteria in each one of these user steps too. So let's move on. Let's take a look at viewing a restaurant. That's going to be another big feature. So let's break it down so we really understand what it is that they, what is really involved with this feature. So view a restaurant that I want to order from. Well, maybe I want to see its ratings or reviews. So see ratings, star ratings, and read user reviews. Don't want to choose a bad restaurant, so I want to make sure I see what the community thinks of this restaurant. Maybe we have different costs associated with different restaurants for delivery. So maybe we show the delivery cost to the user. So on our platform, maybe we want to give restaurants the ability to offer coupons to better entice people to use our restaurant. So offer coupons. Anything else we think we want to do with viewing the restaurant? Any other ideas? I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, so we'll go ahead and move on to viewing the menu. This is another big piece of the application. Users want to see what's on the menu and how much things cost. So go ahead and add a new sticky. Let's see. So browse a menu to see what they have. Maybe we want to show them popular items at this particular restaurant too, so we'll go ahead and do that too. And we also want to show with each menu item what it cost. Show costs each menu item. Again, we have a detailed idea of how much or what this particular feature view the menu means. We can now tell a story showing the cost of each item in the menu. So with placing an order, so user selects item or items that they want to order. Maybe we give them the ability to, like we see down here, change the quantity. Maybe they want 2 Cokes instead of 1. Allow default to 1. Allow for more. Maybe they have allergies and they need to leave special instructions like leave off the mushrooms or something like that. So we want to allow them to allow user to leave special instructions. For example, allergies. Okay, so I'm going to just create more space here so we can continue to work on the place my order feature. We need to show, well, before we show the total cost, maybe we want to allow the user to add a tip for the driver. Like I said, for the next one, I think it's going to be important that we show them the total cost of their order. And maybe before that, we have to calculate sales tax. Calculate sales tax. Another thing we can do is add annotations to the card. So calculating sales tax, while there are 50 different states in the US, so each state may have a different sales tax rate. So maybe this is a risky task. So maybe we could add an annotation to it that's a little confusing, or it's going to be a little bit more difficult. So we could do that, or we could even change the color. Like maybe red means risk to us. So we'll change it to red to note that this is a particular risky item. Okay, for sign up, for new users, let's see, what do we have to ask them? We'll ask them their email address and their mobile number. So allow user to enter their email address and mobile. Because maybe we want to send them text messages to give them the status of their delivery. They also need to enter a password. And perhaps we want to do sign on using other methods like Facebook or Google. So maybe that's an extra piece of scope we could have. Sign in other accounts, Facebook or Google. Maybe this needs some discussion, so I'm going to put the discussion annotation on that to denote that we need to talk about that a little bit more. Which providers do we want to allow them to sign in from, and what does it take to do that? So that's why I added the annotation there. Let's see, so if they're an existing user and they need to sign in, they would typically just enter their email address and password. So for sign in, enter username and password. And then there's always, with sign in, there's a bunch of different things that can happen. The defaults are things like username or email address and password are incorrect. So we have a story for email and password are incorrect. And there's always the obligatory I forgot my password, so reset it. Okay, so we got sign in and sign up, and then last, leaving feedback. So we want to get, we want to complete the whole loop and start to get some insight about how our app helped with the user's problem. So we may want to ask them a question or two or rate their experience. So we have asked for a star rating between 1 or 5, leave any detailed feedback in a text box on how to. Okay, so we've built our first user story map for our food delivery app. And here you can get a general idea I did the steps in white, so I'm going to change this color to white of what our application looks like. And now we can tell the story with the entire team of what each one of these little detailed steps means. And we can break this down as far as you want to. Whatever the right breakdown area or breakdown levels for you for it to be consumable by members on the team. The next piece that we want to do after we build our story map is we always have more features to build than we have time. So we have to slice it. And maybe we want to have an MVP and a second release. So the way I would do that is use these horizontal dividers. And we'll call this our first release. Which is our MVP. And we'll add a second release, release 2. That will come sometime later. Let's remove some of these images out of the way and create some more room. So going back to slicing your story map, like what are we going to put in the first release? What's the most important? We're defining the minimum viable product. So we're going to keep tickets that are associated with the MVP in the first release, and then we'll move things that we want to do later down into the second release. So we start looking at our stories and we discuss as a team, what do we think the most valuable things are? What are the must-haves for our first release? And maybe we decide that searching for types and the restaurant name are the most important things, and we can live a little bit longer without restaurants close to me or even searching by stars, the star ratings. So I'm going to move these 2 cards down into the second release and keep these 2 guys up here in the MVP. So this will be in our first product release of our food delivery app. So since we don't have, well, we still could offer star ratings, just maybe not search by them in the first release. Maybe coupons aren't something we're going to do in the first release. So I'm going to drag that down to the second release right there. And then I simply just move on through the map, and we as a group or as a team go through each of the tickets and put them in either the MVP release, the first release, or the second release. And you could have more than just 2 releases. You could have 3, 4, 5. You could do it by sprint if you wanted to, each 2-week cycle. If you're releasing at the end of every 2 weeks on your sprint, you could do it that way. So you could have sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3. We're simply just breaking this up into 2 releases just for to keep it simple today. So moving on, let's see, browsing the menu, that's a must-have. Showing popular items, maybe we could live with that without the first release. So we'll bring that down. And we would just go through this exercise for all the remaining tickets, just so that we can see which release we're going to be putting these into. So again, just to reiterate the process, I started off with the most high-level things that the user would do in green. I broke it down a little bit further with the blue cards. Then finally, I went into details, which could be tasks that developers would implement, much more smaller bite-sized chunks that someone could implement the story with the white cards. And I colored this one in red because I did note that it had some risk associated with it. Okay. So that's it. We built our first user story map. So we first try to seek and understand what our goals are, what our objectives are, and to better understand our customers. Next, you create the backbone or the activities. Those are the cards in green. Then you break those down into more manageable chunks, which are called stories. And then last but not least, you slice it. So I found this quote on the internet. I like it a lot. Understand your customers' needs better, then update your product to make them better. That's a good way to make sure you're building the right product, is to better understand your customers' needs. And if you level them up, it'll compound itself and help your product in return.